doing prep work, trying to stay and read about all the teams in the SEC. Read Anchor of Gold. That's the Vanderbilt website. Want to know about the opposition position to the Tennessee Volunteers. And I really started liking the writing of my next guest. His name is Tom Stephenson, writes for SB Nation. Admittedly, I realize, this is Tennessee country. It's not Vanderbilt country, and Vanderbilt country probably only includes Davidson County, which has quite a lot of Tennessee, which has quite a lot of Tennessee fans in it as well. But the last 4 out of 6 years, Vanderbilt has defeated the Volunteers. That was unheard of at one time. So let me just start off here. He's the lawyer. He's in Mexico. He's joining us because, well, one of the 5 days it rains at his vacation spot. But tell us a little bit. In your opinion, how have the Vanderbilt Commodores been able to defeat the Tennessee Volunteers 4 out of the last 6 seasons?
Well, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are probably going to think that it's mostly because of Butch Jones and Derek Dooley and, how down the Tennessee program has been in the last few years. But I think that's partially on Vanderbilt as well. There was a time, I enrolled at Vanderbilt in 2006, and not too long before that, Vanderbilt was basically fielding an FCS team. And, over the last decade, most of the recruits that have been coming into Vanderbilt have, at the very least, they've had offers from other FBS schools, if not other SEC schools. So I think the talent level at Vanderbilt has really, it's still probably the lowest in the SEC, but it's at least in the ballpark, and that's made a big difference on the Commodore side. I'm sure most Tennessee fans are aware of the issues with the Volunteers program over the last decade.
Well, they're going to blame coaches, but one of the things that I often say is, and I use Vanderbilt because they are traditionally looked upon as you say, cannon fodder. I used to write for a magazine around here in the Tri-Cities, Tom Stephenson of SB Nation, called Sports Talk. And I remember one time, somebody wanted to try to be a good columnist like Marky Billson. That wasn't going to happen. But their big thing was the SEC will kick out Vanderbilt and take in Virginia Tech. And you got to be a real Tri-Cities homer to believe that was going to happen, but it showed the lack of respect that the Commodores program had. Why would we want this? 24 straight losing seasons. Come on, bringing everything down, except, of course, academically. And where I'm going with this question, Tom, is since that time, there have been, not just at Vanderbilt, but all over the SEC, lots of changes with the addition of an SEC network. Everybody's getting more money. And while Tennessee is more profitable, that means all the other teams are more solvent. And they can do things like build an indoor practice facility that had never been heard of, or a new practice field at Vanderbilt that they didn't have under, say, Woody Woodenhofer or whoever. And I just say, do you think it's more of an even playing field now in the SEC than it was in years gone by? That's my question to you, Tom Stephenson.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think that now, obviously, even with the additional money, you're still dealing with things like, well, Vanderbilt still has academic standards. It's tough to get players in the program, and at the end of the day, Florida and Georgia have much better recruiting bases than everybody else. But aside from that, and Vanderbilt's facilities are still pretty far behind the rest of the conference. And there have been a couple of articles in the Tennessean in the past week talking about, what exactly Vanderbilt is not doing to keep up with the Joneses in the SEC. But yeah, I think I would say that's pretty accurate that, a rising tide lifts all boats, and, more money coming into the SEC coffers have meant, Vanderbilt and, Kentucky and Missouri are, more competitive with the rest of the conference because of that.
I would point out, I don't necessarily think high academic standards are something to frown upon, or something that, it cannot be, I hate to say, overcome but I kind of think it can oftentimes be as much of a blessing as a curse. You know, you're going to get intelligent players when you have that. Schools like Baylor and Northwestern, let's just say, have been winning more in contemporary times in the past. Certainly Stanford. And I'll just give you this. Josh Dobbs, why does he go to Tennessee? Because they have a great engineering department. If they don't, he's probably going somewhere else. What is the second toughest college to get into in the SEC in terms of acceptance rate? It's Florida. They're the Vanderbilt and Florida, the only two schools in the SEC that accept less than 50% of their applicants. I don't see anybody down at Florida saying, well, sure, we got Dan Mullen, but we just got to let everybody in. I don't see anybody down there doing it. So I've always looked at that, well, we have high academic standards, as be something of an excuse more than anything else, my opinion. However, it may have some, as you mentioned here, what am I looking at here? Some cultural difficulties, if you will, because I know that last week there were some stories. Vandy can't raise money for football. The money that has been raised that other programs might put into building a new stadium. No. The old yard that they used to play the Clinic Bowl in, it's historic. It's good enough for us. What about these battles internally? Is there a problem within the program that would prevent having nice things at Vanderbilt?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think that it's hard to say as somebody who is outside of the athletic department. I think the athletic director. There have been rumors for years that he's going to retire and is not really the best fundraiser. And I think there are a lot of rumors that the chancellor is actually. So, the Adam Sparks article in the Tennessean last week detailed a lot of the stuff that's going on. And some of what it comes down to is that, like, the different departments at Vanderbilt, when they do their fundraising, a lot of the times they try to keep the other departments, including athletics, from having access to their donors. And this is the kind of thing that, what hurts Vanderbilt here is that being a private school, UT, when they want to raise capital for, new the taxpayers, and that's everything at the university. And it's basically just, I think there are a lot of people think that Vanderbilt's chancellor just wants Vanderbilt to be an Ivy League school and de-emphasize athletics, or at least football. And I don't know if that's 100% correct, but it does come off that way when you have donors who want to put money towards a new football stadium, and essentially the university is just saying, no, we don't really want that right now. We have other priorities that you can donate to. And so right now it just seems like it's starting to come off like football, and it's specific, more broadly athletics, but mostly football is just
said. And I realize that the Commodores are picked last in the SEC East this year, but I look at decent quarterback coming back in Kyle Shermer, as well as the fact that Derek Mason has proven over the years starters coming back. I mean, it seems like good defense goes back to the Woody Woodenhofer days, if you really want to go there. Now, let me just ask you this, with that, how important do you think it is to have a new stadium? Like I said, it's small, but you're probably never going to draw 100,000 fans, in Nashville, especially when you're competing against the Titans. And plus, there is some history there. I mean, could efforts might be better off to try to make it into the nicest yard it can be, and then maybe getting the Tennessee State Championships back there or so. What are your thoughts on the need for a new stadium?
Well, I think some of that's a little, it's hard to say, because when you really press a lot of fans on the issue, a lot of it comes back to, we just want more comfortable seating and a nicer concourse. I mean, nobody really thinks that Vanderbilt Stadium needs to be expanded. If anything, a lot of people would on its own is, yeah, I mean, 40, it beats 40,000 right now, but I mean, the only reason it ever sells out is because fans of the visiting team will show up in large numbers. So I think, you know, a lot of people say that Vanderbilt could probably get by a lot better with. I think that, you know, and honestly, as far as recruiting goes, I mean, the new stadium is not going to affect much. I don't think any recruits are going to care if, you know, Joe Booster has a luxury box where, you know, he can schmooze before the game. So, I mean, it's really just, I think the other football facilities would be a better use of funding right now. If that can come in. I mean, I know there have been multiple former players on Twitter just saying, you know, in addition to the stadium, they need all this other stuff. The stadium is just, I think because that's the one that is the most visible to fans, that's the one that just becomes the rallying point around what would be a broader commitment to the football program and more money spent on it.
Yeah, it's a little reminiscent, different but similar, because you're looking at the state, incidentally. The athletic programs individually were kind of expected to raise their own money. And as a result, ETSU would have a great golf program because, you know, there aren't that many bank presidents that really care about improving their form tackling. And let's face it, a golf coach has a little bit less day-to-day duties than, say, a football coach does. And so as a result, football stunk to the point where it was dropped, and golf could beat Tiger Woods' Stanford team in a tournament in 1996. So it had come down to that. So yeah, fundraising, very important. And these are some of the things I wanted to have on there to find out a little bit about the differences there between one and the other. Now, one of the things also, when you were looking at sentence that you wrote, or excuse me, this paragraph that you wrote, you're talking about, in previewing the Vols, how Jeremy Pruitt came to be the Vols coach. And you had the guts to write this. It would later turn out that Phil Fulmer was intentionally sabotaging athletic director John Curry's coaching search in an effort to get the AD job for himself, and it worked. Instead of Mike Leach coming in, then no, it's Pruitt and Fulmer instead of Leach and an outside. Have been better off with, Fulmer and Pruitt, or with their opinion?
Well, okay, I'll start with, I think that I know the manager of the Kansas State blog and SB Nation, John Morrison. He was telling me, in fact, long before Tennessee's head coaching search, Curry had been the athletic. On one end of that, you're much better off with anybody other than John Curry. I think with, Philip Fulmer, he may not be an experienced athletic director, but I think right now, just having somebody who cares a lot about the University of Tennessee in the athletic director's chair is going to be a good thing. As far as Jeremy Pruitt goes, I'm up in the air on that because, coordinators who are first-time head coaches coming into the SEC, he could be Kirby Smart, he could be Derek Mason or Mark Stoops. I mean, there's just a lot of different outcomes possible with Jeremy Pruitt and he seems wants to, just be a consistent third-place team in the East, which is probably what they would be under Mike Leach. Or Jeremy Pruitt, well, maybe you get something better than that, but it could just completely crash and burn. So that's really a question I'm not qualified to answer, but I think that, if you are fine with the risk, then I think Pruitt's a pretty good hire for that.
I would just point this out. I mean, when you look at Leach, you say he's capped at 9 victories or so. Texas Tech to the top 5 at periods into consideration right there,
Yeah.
with Leach before you dismiss him as that. And I'll just point this out: last 3 years, Washington State has won more games than Auburn. I mean, consider that real fast, and all this.
Yeah,
So,
that's with the boosters at the university, he would play well with them, and that could be a different issue with him as well.
well, the difference I think is that he's a personality, and he's not going to take orders from the old coach. It's bottom line. I thought it was very telling that when Fulmer did become the AD, all the head coaches that said to have been interested in the job, they no longer were. It became coordinators. It became people that were willing to take orders. And so that started to make me think, well, who is really going to lead the thing? Well, maybe Mason has the best of intentions, but that maybe he had at Stanford, or that the Stanford program had when they started, building houses for their coaches so that they didn't have to worry about paying rents in the Bay Area and so on and so forth. I'm talking to Tom Stephenson. Now, he covers Vanderbilt for SB Nation, Anchor of Gold. So that's why we've kind of focused in on this, still giving us some interesting ideas here. And if I have to ask you, who's your sleeper team? Who is your sleeper team in the SEC?
Oh, is the SEC as a whole or just
in the SEC as a whole? I mean, everybody and their brother is saying Alabama and Georgia and everybody else in their divisions, and it's just who finishes second. But if that is the case, who do you think will have the strongest second?
I think Texas A&M. They've been recruiting well, and I think Jimbo Fisher is probably. He's probably just what they need to get them moving forward. And there's more talent on the roster than their recent results would have you think. I think that's one that I don't think they'll win the West, but I could see them finishing second behind Alabama.
All right. Now, next thing I want to, the stories have come out here, Tom Stephenson, that Deuce Wallace, who's a backup quarterback for Vanderbilt, has been suspended, and so if Kyle Shermer goes down, then there's nobody with any experience to back him up. Look, I think that if Kyle Shermer goes down, whether they had an experienced quarterback or not to back him up, I mean, yeah, that would probably be it for any hope of making a bowl game for Vanderbilt one way or the other. But let me ask you this. Tell me a little bit about Kyle Shermer. How good do you think this guy can be? Can he be this year in his senior year an elite quarterback in the SEC?
Yeah, I think he can be an elite quarterback. I think he's got the physical tools to be good now, and Vanderbilt's returning all 5 starters on the offensive line too, so that's going to be helpful too. Now, the bigger question is whether he's going to have any receivers to throw to. I think there are a couple of true freshmen that could come in and probably start, but that should tell you something about some of the wide receivers that are currently on the roster, that true freshmen might just have to make an impact for the receiving to be any good. But yeah, I think it's everything around him. Now, he's not very mobile, so he's definitely a quarterback who's going to be dependent a lot on the talent around him. But if Vanderbilt can find some difference makers in the receiving core, then I think he could have a really good senior season.
I'm not against the immobile QB. I like the guy who thinks throw first. I got to tell you that, Tom Stephenson. I think that's the way the game is going. I like it when the play begins 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage, beyond the line of scrimmage instead of 7 yards behind it. That's Billson philosophy of football 101. So, you got 5 starters back in the line. The guy's a pocket passer. Hey, that sounds pretty decent to me, to be brutally honest with you. Vandy was picked 7th because, and Georgia's picked number 1. Alabama's picked number 1. How much, when you get in those SEC rankings, Tom Stephenson, do you think it is a legitimate ranking? We really think this is, and how much of it is program reputation in your mind?
As a Vanderbilt fan, it's easy to say that program reputation affects it a lot because, even during the Franklin years when we had a couple of 9-win seasons in a row, we weren't picked very highly in the East. But I think
he's saying we, like he played for the team. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, and I think that, but other than that, I can't really find much to complain about with the rankings this year. I mean, I could definitely see Vanderbilt finishing 7th in the East. That wouldn't surprise me at all. So that would be, I guess it's a little bit of both.
So you're looking at that. Do you think the Vols are on the right track? Do you think that, this streak of success Vanderbilt has had can continue because, things have changed, some evening up in terms of this? Franklin was 9 victories, and look, they don't even want to put any money into the stadium. How much longer do you think this success of I once wrote a story at Saturday Down South, and it was how Vanderbilt can win. And I mean, I even mentioned that I thought that there could be advantages for a high academic institution. I mean, I could go to a quarterback recruit and say, hey, look where Ryan Fitzpatrick is from. Look the courses that Tom Brady took. Look where Trevor Siemian is from, or RJ3. Do you want to be Jay Cutler, or do you want to be Johnny Manziel? And then tell me about, wanting to play at, or where they say farmers fight or whatever. That's what my argument was, because it seems like the high academic schools do produce some pretty decent quarterbacks. And that was one of my thoughts there. But do you think that, what with has come out this week in terms of fundraising, that it is destined for Vanderbilt to go back into the cellar? Or do you think that since TV money has evened it up, that Vandy can be more competitive and it's not going to be the automatic, had that on their schedule, it's not going to be the automatic homecoming game, so to speak?
Yeah, I think that they can stay out of the that's apparently not happening right now. In some ways, I think that there may need to be different leadership at the top of the football program. I mean, we'll see at the end of this season, but after the way the defense looked last year, but we'll see. I mean, if this season, if this season leads to a bowl game, I think they're going to keep him.
And I open up the News Sentinel and I say, don't count Tennessee out of that Florida and West Virginia game. I don't know about West Virginia. I got to tell you that. Tom Stephenson, thanks for joining us. We'll perhaps when Vanderbilt and Tennessee plays, we'll be talking to you again. It's Tri-City Sports Now. Want to look at the teams that Tennessee and the local teams will play who started off here. It's Tri-City Sports Now, asking a question when we come back. Could Jalen Hurts transfer to Tennessee? Could he be the quarterback in 2019? Talk about that when we return.
Now for building.
And then